A homeless man walks into a five-star restaurant. Guests laugh. Security moves forward. But then the owner appears, drops to his knees and whispers, "Welcome home, sir." The entire room freezes. Who is this man in torn clothes? Why is a millionaire bowing before him? What happened 30 years ago that changed everything? This is a story about hidden angels, forgotten kindness, and the moment judgment turns to tears. Stay until the end. You'll never see people the same way again. Welcome to our channel Truth Turn Stories, where real-life truths turn into powerful lessons. If this story speaks to you, subscribe and support the journey. Sometimes the most extraordinary moments happen in the most ordinary seconds, when a door opens and everything you thought you knew about people changes forever. This is a story about judgment, redemption, and the kind of love that refuses to forget. It begins on a Thursday evening, in a place where appearances meant everything until they meant nothing at all. The restaurant gleamed like a jewel box. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, casting warm golden light across polished marble floors. White tablecloths were pressed to perfection. Silver cutlery reflected candlelight. Guests moved through the space like elegant dancers. Men in tailored suits worth more than most monthly salaries. Women draped in silk and diamonds that caught the light with every gesture. Champagne flutes clinked softly. Laughter floated through air scented with truffle and expensive wine. This was a world of refinement, a world of exclusivity, a world where everyone knew the rules. Then the front door opened. A figure stepped inside from the cold evening air. The room didn't just notice, it recoiled. The man wore a jacket torn at the sleeves, fabric faded and stained from years of weather and wear. His boots were cracked leather, held together more by habit than craftsmanship. Silver hair fell wild and uncombed around a weathered face, lines carved deep by sun and sorrow. His hands were rough, fingernails edged with dirt. He stood in the doorway, blinking against the sudden warmth and light, looking around with eyes that held something the guests couldn't name. Sadness, maybe, or memory. The reaction was immediate. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Heads turned. Whispers rippled through the dining room like poison spreading through clear water. A man at table 7 muttered to his companion, voice dripping with disgust. A woman in pearls clutched her designer purse tighter against her body, as if poverty itself might be contagious. From a corner table, cruel laughter erupted, young professionals in expensive watches finding humor in the contrast, in the audacity of this man daring to enter their sanctuary. Someone called security. A voice hissed from somewhere near the bar. The maitre d' moved swiftly, his polished shoes clicking against marble. His face was tight, professional alarm fighting with practiced courtesy. He opened his mouth to speak, to handle this situation with the firm politeness reserved for people who didn't belong. But before a single word could escape, different footsteps echoed from the back hallway. Slower, heavier, purposeful. The owner emerged from his office. Marco Rossini was a dignified man in his early 60s, silver threading through dark hair, wearing a perfectly tailored suit that spoke of success, earned, not inherited. He had been going through invoices when his assistant knocked, stammering about a situation in the dining room. Marco had walked out expecting a complaint, perhaps an issue with a reservation. Instead, his eyes found the figure standing just inside the entrance. His entire body went still, the color drained from his face, then flooded back, flushed with emotion too powerful to name. Every eye in the restaurant watched as Marco crossed the dining room. The laughter died. The whispers stopped. Silence fell like snow, soft and complete. Marco stopped 3 feet from the stranger, their eyes locked. Recognition flashed between them, visible and electric. Then, slowly, deliberately, Marco Rossini, owner of the city's most prestigious restaurant, dropped to one knee on the marble floor. He bowed his head. When he spoke, His voice cracked with emotion that echoed off the high ceilings. "Welcome home, sir." Confusion flooded every watching face. The beggar's eyes glistened with tears. The mystery had only just begun. Marco remained on one knee, head bowed, while the entire restaurant held its breath. Slowly he rose, reaching for the weathered man's hand. His grip was firm, reverent, like touching something sacred. Tears streamed down Marco's face without shame. The guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, champagne forgotten, expensive meals growing cold. No one understood what they were witnessing, but everyone sensed it mattered. The man in the torn jacket stood motionless, silver hair catching the chandelier light, eyes glistening but saying nothing. His silence felt heavy with stories untold. Marco turned to face the dining room, still holding the stranger's hand. His voice shook but carried clearly through the hushed space. "This man," he began, "is Daniel Rossini. 30 years ago he owned the most beloved restaurant this city has ever known." Confused glances ricocheted between tables. A restaurant owner? This homeless man? It seemed impossible. But Marco continued, his words painting a picture that slowly came into focus like a photograph developing in gentle light. Daniel's restaurant hadn't been fancy. No crystal chandeliers or marble floors. Just honest wooden tables, checkered tablecloths, and the smell of food made with love. But what made it special wasn't the decor. It was Daniel's heart. He fed everyone. Businessmen in suits sat beside artists covered in paint. College students scraped together coins for pasta, while homeless souls found warmth and a hot meal given freely, with no judgment, no questions asked. Daniel had a motto printed on every menu, words that became legend in the neighborhood: "Dignity has no price tag." He treated every person like royalty, whether they paid with $100 bills or couldn't pay at all. Marco's voice dropped lower, thick with emotion. Then tragedy struck, he explained. Daniel's wife, his childhood sweetheart, the love of his life, fell ill. Cancer, merciless and expensive. The medical bills came like waves, drowning them. Daniel fought the only way he knew how. He sold the restaurant to pay for treatments, then their home, then every possession they owned, piece by piece, memory by memory, until nothing remained but love and hope. He spent every dollar, every cent, fighting for her life. But sometimes love isn't enough to stop death. She passed away in his arms, leaving him alive but shattered. The room was silent except for Marco's voice and the quiet sound of people trying not to cry. Daniel had vanished after the funeral. Marco continued. No one knew where he went. The truth was simple and devastating. Broken by grief, drowned in debt, Daniel became homeless. He became exactly what he used to serve. The man who fed hundreds now slept on benches and stood in soup kitchen lines. But here was the miracle that defied understanding. Despite losing everything, Daniel never lost himself. He never lost his gentle eyes or quiet grace. For 30 years he wandered the streets, still helping others even though he had nothing. He shared blankets on cold nights. He smiled at strangers who looked through him like he was invisible. He gave his last dollar to a hungry child. Marco's voice cracked completely. "I was that child," he whispered. The confession hung in the air like a prayer. 28 years ago, Marco had been a runaway kid, 12 years old and starving on a street corner. A homeless man with kind eyes bought him soup with money begged that morning. They sat together on a bench. The man didn't lecture or preach. He just smiled and said, "Everyone deserves dignity." Marco never forgot those words, never forgot those eyes. He built his life on that philosophy, eventually opening this restaurant on the foundation of Daniel's kindness. And today, finally, he could repay the debt that changed everything. Marco's voice rang clear and strong through the silent dining room, still holding Daniel's weathered hand. "This man taught me that wealth isn't measured in gold," he declared, looking at each face in turn. "He taught me that how we treat people when they have nothing reveals everything about who we are." His words landed like stones in still water, ripples of realization spreading across the room. He told them how that single bowl of soup changed his life, how those kind eyes gave him hope when the world felt cruel, how he built his entire business on Daniel's philosophy, on the motto he'd seen outside tonight, the same words Daniel lived by decades ago. Every success Marco achieved, every award won, every 5-star review, all of it traced back to a homeless man who shared his last coins with a starving child. The guests who had laughed now stared at their plates, shame burning hot across their cheeks. The cruel jokes died in their throats, tasting like poison. The young professionals in expensive watches felt their faces flush, unable to meet anyone's eyes. They had mocked a man whose generosity outweighed their entire net worth. The woman in pearls who clutched her purse tight felt tears sting her eyes. She remembered suddenly, painfully, her own struggles 20 years ago. Eviction notices, empty refrigerators, the judgment in people's eyes when she wore the same dress twice. When had she become the person who looked at others that way? When had she forgotten? Daniel stood quietly beside Marco, tears streaming down his weathered face, catching in the lines carved by years of sun and sorrow. When Marco finished speaking, Daniel's voice emerged soft as a whisper, but clear enough for everyone to hear. "I didn't come for recognition," he said, shaking his head gently. "I was walking past and saw the sign outside. My old motto, 'Dignity has no price tag.' I just wanted to see if kindness still lived here." His voice broke. "I wanted to know if the world still remembered." Marco pulled him into an embrace, this dignified restaurant owner holding the homeless man like a father, like a savior. "It lives because of you," Marco whispered against his shoulder. "Everything good here exists because you showed me how." Servers gathered around them, eyes wet with tears, mascara running, tough-line cooks wiping their faces with dish towels. They had heard stories about the restaurant's philosophy, but never knew the source. Now they understood. They were part of something bigger than expensive food and elegant service. They were carrying forward a legacy of love. Then something extraordinary happened. One by one, guests rose from their tables, not with pity in their eyes, but reverence, respect, recognition of something sacred standing before them. A CEO in a $3,000 suit approached, voice humble. "Sir, if you need work, I have a position, not charity. Your wisdom is worth more than any degree." A prominent lawyer stepped forward next, business card trembling in her hand. "I offer my services pro bono, for anything you need." It would be an honor. Others followed, offering resources, connections, help given not from superiority, but from awakened hearts. The man who had laughed loudest, the one whose cruel jokes started the mockery, walked forward last. His hands shook. His face was wet with tears. Slowly, he dropped to his knees before Daniel, voice breaking into pieces. "Forgive me," he whispered. I forgot we're all human. I forgot that could be me. I forgot everything that matters." Daniel placed a weathered, gentle hand on the man's shoulder. His touch was warm, forgiving. "We all forget sometimes," he said softly, helping the man to his feet. "That's why we must keep reminding each other." In that moment, every mask in the room fell away, and people remembered what they'd lost in the pursuit of wealth and status, their own humanity, and the shared dignity that connects every soul. That night, Daniel Rossini sat at the head table beneath the crystal chandeliers, no longer a beggar but an honored father returning home. Someone had brought him a fresh shirt. His silver hair was combed back gently. His weathered hands rested on white linen. But it wasn't his appearance that had changed. It was how every person in the room saw him. The light hadn't shifted. Their eyes had. Marco stood and raised his glass, the crystal catching candlelight like a promise made visible. His voice carried the weight of gratitude 3 decades deep. "Tonight, we start something new," Marco announced to the room. "Every Sunday, this restaurant will serve free meals to anyone in need, in Daniel's name. No questions asked, no judgment given, only dignity offered. He paused, looking at the man who taught him everything that mattered, because everyone deserves a seat at the table. The room erupted in applause, not polite country club clapping, but real, thunderous appreciation. Guests reached for wallets and checkbooks immediately. The CEO pledged $10,000 on the spot. The lawyer pledged her time. Others followed, voices overlapping with amounts that grew and grew. Within 20 minutes, $73,000 had been donated. Servers wept openly. Even the hardened line cooks stood in the kitchen doorway, tears streaming down their faces. But Daniel's greatest gift that night wasn't measured in money. It was the awakening. Each person who witnessed what happened left transformed in ways bank accounts could never capture. The young professionals who laughed vowed to volunteer at shelters. The woman in pearls began donating designer clothes she'd hoarded for years. The man who called for security now stopped to talk with homeless people instead of looking away. They had seen behind the curtain of appearances and discovered the truth that changes everything. Every human being carries infinite worth, written in invisible ink that only kindness can read. One night, one moment, one choice to see people instead of costumes, and dozens of lives shifted direction like rivers finding new paths to the sea. Weeks turned into months. Daniel didn't just visit the restaurant. He became Marco's partner, standing at the entrance beside him every evening. Together they greeted guests, the ones arriving in limousines and the ones arriving in worn shoes, the powerful and the powerless, the celebrities and the forgotten. Daniel offered the same warm smile to everyone, the same gentle handshake, the same words, "Welcome, we're honored to serve you." His presence transformed the entire atmosphere. The restaurant became legendary, written about in magazines and shared on social media, but not for its luxury or exclusive reputation. It became famous for love, for the way people felt seen there, for Sunday meals where millionaires sat beside mothers struggling to feed their kids, where conversations happened across divides that usually stayed frozen. The food was still exceptional, but that wasn't why people came anymore. They came to remember their humanity. Daniel's story spread like light through darkness, reaching people who needed hope, reminding the comfortable that comfort is fragile, teaching everyone willing to learn that true wealth is measured not by what we own, but by what we give. Every person carries a story written in invisible ink. Only kindness can read it. When we bow to the beggar, we honor the hidden kings among us, the angels in disguise, the teachers dressed in rags. We are all one moment, one tragedy, one twist of fate away from needing grace. One diagnosis, one job loss, one accident. The distance between success and struggle is thinner than we pretend. So offer grace freely, offer dignity without price tags, offer love without conditions. You never know whose life you're changing with a simple act of compassion. And you never know when the beggar you welcome home might be the very person who saves your soul and teaches you what it really means to be wealthy. Treat everyone with dignity. You never know whose life you're changing, or who might change yours.